But if you could be in a portfolio, which is kind of how the smart money, the wealthiest of the wealthiest invest, they have very little downside exposure in their portfolios, which is the first and foremost rule. It's like Warren Buffett once said, when a reporter asked him, what's your number one rule of investing? He said, don't lose money. And then they said, well, what's your second rule of investing? He says, refer back to rule number one. And that's how the richest in the world invest.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another knowledge bomb episode of Lead to Greatness, where we believe in helping others reach their greatest potential and together change the world. And if this is your first time, don't forget to subscribe. Hit that like button, hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of these amazing episodes. And if you're on iTunes, go ahead and rate the podcast and leave a review. That helps get the word out to great leaders and entrepreneurs like yourself. Hello, Mark. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you today, Cedric?
I am doing amazing and definitely glad to have you on the Lead to Greatness podcast on the day. What I want you to do is just go ahead and introduce yourself to the Lead to Greatness community. Let us know a little bit about you.
Sure. So I've been in the business financial consulting industry for about 40 years now, written several nationally published books, had several firms in the financial services industry. About 10 years ago or so, started to do a lot of work, or really even longer than that, on the kind of institutional side, or what we call the smart money side of the business.
Okay.
And met several of the Hiltons. Brad Hilton, who is Conrad Hilton's grandson, is my main partner in Hilton Tax and Wealth Advisors. And just over time, we just built a relationship with the Hiltons to where they asked me to be the manager of the Hilton family office, which is not a giant office compared to a lot of them out there, but it's a nice little family office. And then this spinoff company, Hilton Tax and Wealth Advisors, is Brad Hilton and I's kind of passion to bring a lot of these kind of like high level tax mitigation ideas, wealth building ideas, business building ideas, more down to Main Street and the average investor. For those folks that don't know what a family office is, it's when a bunch of wealthy people get together. They kind of pool all their resources to save money, but also to bounce ideas off and kind of have a synergistic nature to building their wealth more efficiently.
Wow.
But Brad and I have always had this idea and had this passion. Gosh, what if we brought these, incredibly, high-end wealth building ideas that only the wealthy have access to? How can we, and what if we brought these more down to the Main Street investor? And by that, I mean, we work with folks that have portfolios about 250,000 and above, and basically plug those people into portfolios that generally you have to have $15 to $20 million to be part of. Less fees, a much greater degree of safety, so you'll have a less volatility and then higher returns. And so Brad and I have been doing this for about 2.5 years, and it's kind of taken off even better than we expected. But we still, every day we have this, how do we tell people and show people and allow people and help them get access to these type of things and get educated that they're even out there for them to be able to use.
What are some of the common factors or the common misconceptions that individuals on that level may have about taxes?
Yeah, well, let me start with the book I just wrote called Hilton Wealth: How to Invest Alongside an American Dynasty. Kind of teaching what it's teaching, and it's making the distinction between retail investing, which is how the majority of people invest, and really, honestly, and Brad's a little on the soapbox. I wouldn't put it this way, but he says how retail investors are getting ripped off. I wouldn't necessarily say that, because you can be a retail investor and still make okay money. It's just you can make better money on the smart money side of the business, on the institutional side of the business. So this book is about educating people that, first and foremost, most people that will pick up this book and are investing on the retail side because they don't have access to invest on the smart money side.
Right.
And like I said earlier, the advantage to investing on the smart money side is a little to no fees at all that come out of your portfolio, less volatility. So basically, you can sleep better at night. Some of our portfolios that will make between 8 and 12% per year, depending on how we structure it, the worst downside year maybe only be, 8 to 10%,
Yeah.
which when you look at a regular or a retail based equity based portfolio, you could be down 30, 40, 50% in any
Mm.
given year in your portfolio. I think there's a lot of people that are right on the cusp of experiencing that,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's that distinction between the retail side and then the smart money or institutional side that is a much more efficient way. By the way, it's more tax efficient
Okay.
to invest on the smart money side because we have all these strategies that we can incorporate into the portfolios to minimize the taxes to the greatest extent on returns that you receive.
Right. Mark talked about the institution on the smart money side, but I just want you to kind of dig a little bit more into that
Sure.
smart money side of what does that look like to someone that may not quite know smart money.
Sure, absolutely. And I want to offer complimentary to anyone that's listening here. They can go to our website, which is hiltonwealth.com, hiltonwealth, very simple.com. And
Right.
it goes more in depth on this because it is a little hard to grasp
Okay.
because the majority of investors only have available to them like the Fidelities, the Vanguards, the
Absolutely.
Schwabs, the Merrill Lynches of the world.
Yeah.
That's the retail investment side.
Mm.
And retail institutions make a lot of money on retail investors. And their whole concept is, put money in the markets and just let it sit there, just let time do its thing. Okay.
Mm. Yeah.
And on the surface, that sounds good. Just hold on, ups and downs and all that. But the reality is, most people don't like it when the markets drop massively and they lose 20 or 30 or 40% of their portfolio. And then they start doubting themselves or doubting their advisor. And what do? They cut and run.
Right.
Okay. And it's totally understandable. It's human nature. That's what people are about their money.
Yeah.
But if you could be in a portfolio, which is kind of how the smart money, the wealthiest of the wealthiest invest, they have very little downside exposure in their portfolios, which is the first and foremost rule. It's like Warren Buffett once said when a reporter asked him, "What's your number one rule of investing?" He said, "Don't lose money." And they
Mm.
said, "Well, what's your second rule of investing?" He says, "Refer back to rule number one." And that's how the richest in the world invest. They big chunks of their portfolio are safe, secure, making like a nice little rate of return. And then they take some risk with a certain percentage of their portfolio. So they're still able to get that high rate of return or very comparable rate of return you can get on the retail side. But they're doing it with a lot less volatility. In
Mm.
some cases, we design portfolio, depending on what people's risk tolerance is, to have almost zero risk and still make a really solid rate of return on an
Wow.
annual basis.
Mark, that's individuals right now that's listening to this for the first time, and
Yeah,
that's individuals that didn't know the difference between retail and smart money. I want
yeah,
you to kind of open up because most of us know about the retail, we know about the Merrill Lynch, and we know about all of these different platforms. But I really want to focus on this smart money on today for an individual that's just getting this idea and this concept. What are some of the things they need
yeah.
to learn in going down this avenue of smart money
Great question.
investing?
Right. Well, first of all, so we have these proprietary portfolios we build
Okay.
called the Hilton True Wealth portfolios. But let me just give you the concept of them. It's
Okay.
basically a bucket concept.
Okay.
We have four main buckets, sometimes five or six, depending on the complexity a design and portfolio for a client. But number one is a guaranteed portion that will be safe and secure. So if something drastic or horrific happens, then we can take a good percentage of the portfolio and it's not going anywhere. Now, that may not get the greatest rate of return, but if it's making 3 or 4% per year and is a chunk in your portfolio that is not going to go anywhere no matter what happens, that is a phenomenal base. If you looked at your
Right.
investments or investment portfolio like a pyramid, this is the base. And the base is always the strongest on the pyramid, right? So you
Yeah.
want a solid base.
Gotcha.
And then if you go up to the next bucket, then we generally have a guaranteed income bucket where we can go out to some of our Hilton sources in the Hilton Financial Network and get, 6, 7, 8, 10, depends on the offering, guaranteed interest rates on an annual basis. Okay.
Mm,
And generally, those offerings will have some baseline guarantees on principal too. Okay. Then we have your more equity based bucket, which is more of what people you're used to on the retail side. But we go to the best money managers in the world, and they design kind of a well allocated and diversified equity portfolio, and
mm,
then we kind of let that do its thing with so a percentage of your assets will go into there, and then finally, and this is what's really big. So number one is the safety and the security of those first two buckets.
mm,
And then this fourth bucket is what we call private equity or alternatives, where we plug
mm.
our clients into these specialized investments that still have a degree of safety and security,
Yeah.
what we call surety, actually, in that space, surety, um, but give us the chance for some home runs. So,
Mm,
like, we can invest in a pre-IPO of companies we know and that we have direct access to, not insider trading or anything like that, but we
right.
know the founders,
Yeah.
we know what to expect, and we've had a long-term relationship with them. And those could be 25% plus per year.
Wow.
It kind of depends on the offering. So when you combine all that together, and that's kind of where you start in investing like a smart money investor. When you combine all those together in a well diversified and allocated portfolio, you minimize your volatility significantly,
Yeah.
but then you've still got the great upside potential. And over time, we generally beat equity-based portfolios, like say an equity and bond-based
Yeah.
portfolio. We generally beat them by 1 or 2% per year, sometimes more.
But I want to step back real quick and ask you this question. Were you born into wealth?
No.
All right, great answer. And the reason why I'm asking that, because you were not born into wealth and you are surrounded around wealthy people, not born into wealth and being around wealthy people. What are some of the things that you learned, the different mindsets and the different
That's right.
concepts in the way wealthy people think
Mhm.
and the way people without wealth think?
Well, I'll tell you a little story about that because, and actually, I wasn't born into wealth. Matter of fact, both my parents died when I was in college, and I had to work my way through college. I ran painting companies during the
Wow.
summer and painted
Yeah.
houses
Yeah.
with crews, hired guys, and that's kind of how I got my first foray into the business world.
Yeah.
So I started. I had to put myself through college, so I
Yeah.
started from scratch and built
Mm,
everything I have.
yeah.
But what happened was I got out of college and then I worked for IDS American Express and in the financial services industry. And that was very much a retail thing. And then I went to work for a local brokerage firm in Atlanta here and started to learn brokerage. And just all I had and pounded in my head was equities, equities, equities. But then I was fortunate to get a couple just kind of through networking and everything, get a couple very wealthy clients.
Mm,
And they introduced me to a different world, the
mm,
world that I've been talking about. That's not all, because the retail world really centers around equities.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's where, why does it do that? Because we've been trained, and the American people have been trained to do that, because that's where Wall Street makes their money, on the retail side of the business.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So people think, oh, well, look at this great opportunity. I can buy these stocks and bonds and all this kind of stuff. And they don't know what's really behind that. They've been manipulated to, that's all you have to invest in.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's because it's about fees, and it's about what
Absolutely.
they get paid. They don't make much money at all when you start talking about safer types of investments, and they often don't play at all in the private equity, on the alternative space
Yeah.
that the smart money folks play in. So I got into this just by in some ways by chance, by getting some really good clients that then introduced me to kind of the institutional side, introduced me to a lot of the people like in the trust side of the business, and trust companies like Northern Trust and things like that,
Oh.
to where then I could start learning and understanding there was a whole different world there,
Mm.
which is basically what we talk about in the book Hilton Wealth.
I want you to particularly talk to someone that may be 30 years old and younger. What
Mhm.
advice would you give to them on a wealth standpoint? Because someone at that age is sometimes not really thinking about, the future or building wealth. They're just living for today. What advice would you give to them? And if you
Well,
was advising
yeah.
them on wealth?
And if you can't afford, or you don't happen to have $250,000 or something to invest with us, which is our minimum,
Yeah,
then I tell everybody it's okay to start on the retail side.
yeah,
Go to Vanguard, go to Schwab, look at one of their managed portfolios,
mhm,
ask a lot of questions, and start somewhere.
yeah,
Okay. And here's the thing, when someone's young, do not neglect, do not, under any circumstances, neglect putting money aside
yeah,
for your future.
yeah.
I always recommend, and I actually wrote one of the idiot guides in the 90s
Oh,
on saving and investing.
mm.
And not that anybody on here is an idiot, but at times we're all idiots about money, that's for sure. So
Yeah,
I've learned a lot, but I still can learn more, still can
yeah,
learn more. So in my book, in that particular book, I talk about the budgeting by savings method. Now,
mm,
what do I mean by that? Is that focus on saving and building wealth first, and everything can come from there.
mm,
Don't go out there. I always tell you, go out and make a budget. Go out and make a budget. I've always felt that, and when I've talked to a lot of people over the years, that's exhausting. And
mm,
especially for people that aren't numbers people, and even they've got apps to make it easier now, but no one wants to think about a budget. A
yeah,
budget. Ugh, I don't
yeah,
want to be in a budget, right?
yeah,
So what I say is a budgeting by savings. Okay, put yourself on a budget by deciding how much money you can set aside on a monthly a basis,
yeah,
and then just live within what's left. Be just disciplined about that.
mm,
I guarantee you that 30-year-old, if they just do that for a year, if every I would recommend every 2 weeks, not every month, but every 2 weeks, you put $50 aside, $100 aside, whatever you can afford to put aside,
yeah,
that will become a habit. And then as you make more money, okay, you can then up that, but you'll also be upping your budget. So you'll be
yeah,
living a better life,
yeah,
okay? But you're focused on investing, on building wealth, okay?
yeah,
And invested in something. I'd recommend you go to one of those retail firms and at least get started,
yeah,
and just consistently put money away every 2 weeks. Okay. And then the rest will work itself out. But you got to stay disciplined. But here's the thing, you don't have to stay disciplined to your budget.
Yeah.
You stay disciplined to the money you're setting aside, your budget will happen naturally. Yeah,
Mm.
you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What your mind does, it's like you won't, because you're so committed to that saving, you won't go blow your budget out of the water,
Yeah.
because you know that that's going to mess up your investment plan or your
Yeah.
wealth building plan.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so start that when you're young. And I guarantee if there's people listening to this that they're 25, 30, 35 years old, you will totally appreciate what I told you by the time you're age 50. When you have a half a million, $1 million, and
Yeah.
you have so much more options in your life at that time.
Wow. Knowledge bomb. Knowledge bomb. Eh, I want to talk about those four buckets again. And you talked about that foundational bucket. What does that look like? For example, like, does it look like, is that real estate, or what exactly is that looking like?
So you're going to be looking at guaranteed type of assets,
Okay.
whether those are individual notes, whether those are government notes, whether those are guaranteed contracts from life insurance companies. Usually, we have in each one of those buckets maybe 5 or 6 different options that we can
Right.
look at. Okay. The first bucket is that guaranteed bucket. The second is guaranteed income, and they're kind of work together
Okay.
in tandem. And you could say that that's the core and the base of the portfolio because that money's going nowhere. So
Yeah.
let's say the economy goes to heck in a handbasket, then we know at least that money is protected no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, but we hope we
Yeah.
hope we don't have any crazy. We've had some black swan events recently, probably too many in the last 20 years.
Mhm.
But if you had a real black swan, let's say a double black swan,
Yeah.
where an economy would truly collapse, like we almost had in 2008,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. That was bad.
then you're going to be, let's say that 50 or 60% of your money is in those core buckets.
Uh-huh.
You're going to be kissing the ground,
Yeah.
because everybody else is going to have lost everything.
Yeah.
You're going to at least have those intact. So that's what I'm talking about, those being protected from that type of thing. But we hope, and under normal circumstances, then we can still make decent returns in those buckets.
Mhm.
And then the other 2 buckets is where we're really going after our returns, so we can get our average returns of 8, 9, 10% per year. One of the things too is in the book we have a whole chapter on tax mitigation.
Okay.
And the Hiltons happen to be some of the best in the world at advanced tax mitigation strategies, tax saving, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. And the biggest expense you'll have in your life is taxes. Okay.
Mm.
And people just think their tax preparer is doing everything they can for them, but no, they're not. We do deep dive into individuals' taxes. Generally, we'll save folks about 50% per year in their first year on their taxes, all ethical, moral, all within the codes,
Yeah.
stands up to IRS scrutiny. And then we work on zeroing out their taxes over time. So
Mhm.
that just means that they can save. If they can save 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 a year on their taxes, then that just means more money that they can put to building their wealth, and it's going to get them wealthier faster.
Yeah.
Okay. So that tax saving component runs throughout everything that we do, including when we build our portfolios, because we also are focusing on retirement and we're designing, because you have to start well ahead of time to design portfolios that can throw off completely tax free income. I'm not talking about just taking your money and putting it in a municipal bond. I'm
Right.
talking about structuring an entire portfolio
Love it.
to where when you hit retirement time, every penny that comes out of that is completely tax free.
Yeah.
So we work with our clients and on the smart money side, um, the institutional side, they're great at this.
Yeah.
And you'll see this all the time. People are like, well, that's no fair that Jeff Bezos makes, 50 billion dollars a year and he pays zero taxes.
Yeah.
He's cheating the system. He's cheating the system. No, he's doing what the courts tell him he can do.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court has even ruled 2 or 3 times that you are not required by law to pay any more in taxes than the codes say you have to pay.
Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
thing that Jeff Bezos is doing, he has access to folks like us
Yeah.
that know how to mitigate tax, how to use the code. The code, by the way, that was all written
Yeah.
by mostly multimillionaires.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So there's 100,000 of tax code pages. Well, they didn't, most of those people didn't do those just willy-nilly to just take a bunch of money from people.
Yeah.
They did them because they're not only helping themselves, but they're helping their constituents too
Yeah.
when they make those codes. So, but you have to be able to find those. You have to go deep into the codes and find all those strategies that work to get us to a zero bracket.
Yeah. I just want to ask for W-2s. W-2s, do you guys do any work with W-2s or have any advice for individuals that
W-2
still didn't?
employees.
W-2, yeah. W-2
Yeah,
files.
yeah, absolutely. And we work with W2 folks all the time. I
Yeah.
just got off the phone with a gentleman, been W2'd for 30 years, makes a substantial income.
Yeah.
And we're going to show him probably 2 or 3 different strategies to reduce his taxes substantially. So our minimums on that, you generally have to be paying about 30,000 in federal and state taxes for us to work with you. And so we can, because what we do is design a formalized plan. And it's not worth it if you're only paying $5,000 or $10,000 in taxes.
Gotcha.
There's companies out there that do some of the mitigation with that, but that's kind of on the lower end, more on the retail side of the business.
Yeah. Mark, thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's definitely some great insight. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you think the Lead to Greatness audience need to know? Would you share it with us?
Well, no, I think you've done a good job. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I would just go back to, the old saying that you don't know what you don't know until you know it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really what we're all about. And that's what we're getting the word out there with Hilton Tax and Wealth Advisors. We want people to know it now. Okay. I have asked people ask me, well, why do you want to do this? I mean, you're making plenty of money doing the Hilton family office, and we're doing fine, no problems there. But it's because it's a passion, because we know now that we're in the information revolution and the information age. We want to get quality information out to people that truly works and is proven and has, decades and decades of power behind it.
Yeah.
And it's true and it's honest and it's good, great information from great people. As opposed to going online and reading about some tax mitigation strategy or some newfangled way to invest your money and hoping, well, this must be the way to do it. Okay. The bottom line is there is no better way to invest. There is no better way to handle your taxes. And frankly, through Hilton Institute of Business, which is one of our partners, there's no better way to have information and get proper information and good information on building your business than the Hiltons have compiled over 3 generations. So that's what the book is about too. It's about just encapsulating these phenomenal concepts that you don't have to be a Hilton billionaire to be able to plug into.
Mark, knowledge bomb. Thank you so much for sharing this, for just giving this away. I mean, this is priceless information that you are sharing with the community, and we are definitely grateful for that. If someone wants to connect with you and what you're doing, where should they go?
Again, HiltonWealth.com, HiltonWealth.com. They can get in contact us via phone, email. Go to the contact us page if you want a copy of my book, Hilton Wealth. and just say, hey, saw Mark on the podcast today, and please send me a book, and give us your address and we'll address and email, and we'll send that on to you.
Wow. Man, this is great. Definitely glad to have you on the Lead to Greatness podcast on today. It was an absolute pleasure meeting you on today and getting all this nuggets and all this information from you. On behalf of the Lead to Greatness community, I want to thank you so very much, Mark, for taking time out of your busy schedule and adding value to us all.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
We want to thank you for joining us today on the Lead to Greatness podcast. So remember, if you help others reach their greatest potential, together we can change the world. Peace.